Kino pavasaris. Kovo 18, balandžio 5 dienomis visoje Lietuvoje. Didysis partneris Ergo draudimo grupė. Informaciniai partneriai TV3, 15 min žmonės.
Mūsų karta pirmoji supratusi, kaip iš lėto kenkiame gamtai. Ir vienintelė, žinanti, kad dar yra laiko ją išsaugoti. Apsaugokime mūsų visų ateitį. Ergo.
Geriausius kino pavasario filmus parodys žiūrimiausia televizija TV3. Šeštadieniais 22:40.
Festivalis Kino pavasaris jūsų namuose. Visus filmus žiūrėkite Telia televizijoje jums patogiu metu. Telia. Įdomiau tik gyvenimas.
Įtraukia nuo pat pirmųjų sekundžių. Vienu prisėdimu abi serijos susivalgė. Kaip lietuviškas tikrai neblogas.
Tai laba diena, mėly Kino pavasario žiūrovai. Džiaugiuosi sveikindamasi su jumis iš vieno pirmųjų mūsų susitikimų su režisieriais. Ir šiandien mūsų šitose virtualiuose svečiuose yra du režisieriai filmo VISI MIRUSIEJI, kurie prisijungia iš Brazilijos. Tai sveiki atvykę Caetano Gotardo ir Marco Dutra. So, welcome. I feel really bad that we cannot welcome you here physically, but in any case, it's a great pleasure that you joined us for this conversation, and I really wish that there's going to be more chances in the future to meet in person for sure. So, hello.
Yeah. Hi. Hello. We are happy to be here. Of course, we would be much happier to be present in the program. But it's great to be here talking to you.
So you were telling me at before we started this conversation that you are both sitting at your home in São Paulo, right? Can you tell our spectators what is the situation in Brazil at the moment? Is there any film culture going on? Are there any film productions going on? And what is the general state of the country in the context of the COVID crisis, etc.?
Well, right now we both live in São Paulo, and we live 10 minutes from each other, but we haven't seen each other in a long time physically because the whole country and especially the city of São Paulo is in a very bad situation regarding the COVID crisis. Severe measures were announced yesterday for São Paulo, for the state of São Paulo, regarding curfew time, which is from 8 p.m. to 5 a.m., and restriction of commercial activities and transport and situations in which people have the ability to gather, like churches are closed and cinemas and all. So it's a very peculiar wave that we're going through right now, very severe. Hospitals are full, so we have to stay isolated. We have been home for a while, and it looks like we still have to be home for a while.
Yeah, in terms of numbers of deaths and disease, people with the disease, it's the worst moment since the beginning of the pandemic in Brazil. So we really have to take care. Unfortunately, it's still a struggle that people are convinced to take proper care, and so it's a constant struggle. That's why we are in the worst moment, and especially because our government is it's not taking the proper measures, that the president doesn't truly work for searching the proper solutions, and the vaccination is really slow still. So yeah, we are in a very difficult moment, and the cultural scenario is really struggling as well. As Marco said, no cinemas are open, and there's no way for them to be open in a short time. But there are many festivals happening online. Some festivals really found nice ways to work in this format, and we had some very interesting conversations and exchanges between the artists and the audience. I think we are finding ways to keep the cultural life alive, not only with cinema, but with music and with theater. People are really trying to find ways to keep it happening. But of course, we are all missing the opportunity of being together and exchanging personally.
Well, at least
me and Caetano were actually, sorry.
No, it's okay.
Me and Caetano were actually very lucky because we opened our film, this film that we co-directed, All the Dead Ones, and we opened it in Berlin last year in the competition. And just after Berlin, the pandemic spread around the world, and festivals were canceled, and screenings were canceled, cinemas closed, and for a while we were very scared that the film had this beautiful screening in Berlin, but then nothing else would happen. But actually we were lucky because a few months later, after the first months in which actually nothing happened, some festivals started screening the film online, and we started doing some Q&As. And now, actually 1 year later, we're very lucky to say that the film did have a lot of chances to circulate, even if in an online universe around the world. A lot of people were less lucky in the sense that they were shooting and they had to interrupt the shooting, or they were about to shoot and they had to delay indefinitely the beginning of production. So yeah, I think everybody is having to find a way to deal with this situation. It's all very new, and we're still struggling a bit.
I'm really happy that despite the situation, the film still did quite a lot of travel, this virtual travel around the world. But you also did travel, right? You mentioned that you were doing Q&As and so on, which is something really great to hear. But I wanted to ask, because this is the first film that you actually did together, I would love to know, and also I'm sure that our audiences are also curious, what are the reasons behind this decision to join your directorial forces and do this film together?
We've been working together for a long time. We went to film school together. We met there more than 20 years ago. And since film school, we started to collaborate in many different ways. And we created a small collective called Filmes do Caixote, with some other directors and writers. And we work, this group is basically a group of people who like to collaborate, to work together. So we worked, me and Marco worked together in many different ways. He produced one of my short films. I edited some of his films, and I wrote some of his films, and he composed music for some of my things. So we had worked together in many different formations, situations. So we know each other for a long time, and we are very good friends, and we work together. So we really knew how to communicate, and we understood the dynamics of one another. So it came really, really organically. I don't know if it works in English, this word, but it happened really naturally. And we were discussing possibilities of working together for a long time, but when Marco started thinking of this film, in the very beginning of he started thinking about a possible plot for this film and for thinking about that period of time in Brazil. He started showing me some initial ideas, and immediately I connected to that, and I gave some ideas as well, and we noticed it was a project that was passionate for both of us. So we just realized it was a good project to write and direct together. In the meantime, before shooting the film, we were developing the screenplay, and we had a collaboration directing together a theater experiment that went really well. It was a really strong experience for both of us. So we had this experience of co-directing something before shooting the feature. And after shooting the feature film, as we were editing it, we had another experience of co-directing a TV series. So by the end, we had the experiences of co-directing theater, cinema, and TV. So it was really interesting for us after so much time collaborating.
Okay. I was checking IMDb and I didn't see that many. I only saw that later you co-directed together the TV series, and I thought that this is the first such a close collaboration. But it's interesting and beautiful to know that this is along 20 years of the story of 20 years of collaboration, which is beautiful. But Caetano, you mentioned that the initial. The initial idea that probably started this project came from Marco. Maybe Marco, you could tell a little bit more about the problems, or I don't know, there's some issues that sort of inspired you to come up with this story.
I think it was a combination of things. I had been doing a research to a TV series for another director, for another producer, that was a period TV series. It took place in São Paulo, around São Paulo, during the beginning of the São Paulo industrial period. Today, São Paulo is the biggest city in Brazil, one of the biggest in the world. But São Paulo was actually always, during the Brazilian colonial history, São Paulo was not a big, it was a small village. But in the late 19th century, it exploded because of coffee plantations around it. And that's how it became a very big and in a way financially important city to the country. And it sort of coincides with two other things, which is the end of the colonial and empire period of Brazil, the beginning of the Republic, which is in 1889, and with the final abolition of slavery, which was in 1888. So all of these things coincide and make this special moment in this particular place a very important moment of this country's history. It is when the country, how it is today, sort of took shape, took its republican shape. But it's very problematic, as you can imagine. Brazil is still today a very unequal society. A lot of social issues that could have been dealt with at that moment were sort of disguised or not dealt with correctly, and we can still see consequences of all of that period in the way we live here today, in the problems we face and are unable still to solve today. So in a way, that was sort of the general attraction and reason to do a period film in São Paulo. And when I talked to Caetano about it, he immediately related to the idea. He was like, yeah, this is very interesting. This could be our first collaboration. And he already started feeding the project with some other ideas of how can we approach doing a period film without making a classic period film with horses and carriages and dresses and candles and stuff. That was not exactly, our attraction was not exactly formal to doing a period film. It was a more, we wanted to discuss this period in relation to how we live today. So that was like what sort of formed the first ideas of the project. And we have, both of us had a desire to make a film in which characters could express themselves verbally, like we like European and like, for instance, the dramas of Chekhov is something that me and Caetano like a lot. And we thought that we could, if we explore domestic situations with the characters and allow them to speak and to interact through dialogue, this could be a very something that both me and him would like to explore in the writing. So that was the beginning, like to take a look at this house in São Paulo in 1899 and check what's going on in that domestic environment, and then the characters start to appear, started revealing themselves to us, and we started to write. That was like the birth of the project. But it's important to say that this was like 2012, 2013, and as the years went by, the project went through a lot of important transformations when we started sharing it with other people, and we started understanding much more about the Black culture and history in Brazil, and about feminine perspective. A lot of our characters, most of our main characters were women, and so we started to actually interact with with people who read and discussed with us all of these ideas, and it made the project richer and richer as each year passed. And we had at least 2 very, very important script consultants that read several versions of the screenplay and helped us structure it and make it stronger. One of them is Saloma Salomão, who ended up composing the music for the film. He's a historian and an academic, but he's also a musician and singer. And he was a very important collaborator in this film.
It feels like one of the biggest and the most important problems of the film is the current situation of racism in Brazil. You know, we are used to hearing you know, the stories of hatred against one or the other race, you know, coming from US or in Europe, but in Brazil, for me, it always looked like such a multicultural country that probably there's no room for such things like racism. So I could not say that this is, you know, something that was not surprising for me, but it feels like you're making a very strong comment on the racism situation at the moment, which is in Brazil. Can you elaborate a little bit more about the tensions that are between the major, how to say, among the different races in Brazil, and whether it was.
You can complete.
No. So whether it was indeed a problem that you wanted to address.
Yes, that was one of the points of departure for the film, in a way. When we started thinking about that period of time and how it led to what we live today, and how many similarities we could see between the organization of the society that was decided, in a way, exactly on that moment after the end of slavery and the beginning of the Republican system. We couldn't avoid the racial issues, because social issues in Brazil are really related to racial issues. Of course, it was the country had many hundreds of years of slavery, almost 400 years of slavery, and it was the last country in the Americas to end slavery. Not only in the Americas, but in the Western world. So in 1888. So it's not long ago that slavery was a fundamental part of the organization of our society. And after the end of slavery, many aspects from that organization kept really present, were still really present in the way Brazilian people dealt with each other. And it's interesting that you said that you didn't think of Brazil as a place with so much racism, because it's common, and it was really reinforced during the 20th century that Brazil had a racial democracy. That's how we called it. And even in Brazil, for a long time we believed that as a common sense, that, oh, it's all a big mix of races, so there's no such thing as racism in Brazil. But the truth is really different from that. In the daily life, everybody could feel that, especially Black people, of course, and the indigenous people. They are not present in the film because in Brazil the indigenous were really destroyed. It's a really small part of our population right now, because they were killed for many years, and they had their lands taken, and so the races in Brazil, they do exist. The mix didn't solve the problem of racism, and it's curious because in Brazil right now more than 50% of the population is declared, I don't know the word in English, because here we have it's a big discussion, but more than 50% of the population is not white. It's brown and black, and so it's the biggest part of the population, and still the numbers show how white people have the places of power and have the money and have so it's a big thing. It's different from the United States, for example, where the Black population is a minority, and in Brazil, even with the not white people being the majority, they are really oppressed, and the differences are really evident. So from some years to nowadays, this sense of racial democracy was really put in discussion, and many Black people, Black historians, Black researchers, and really fought hard to destroy this false idea of racial democracy and to show how our history was constructed with these racial issues really present, and how Brazilian white elite worked to maintain their privileges even after the end of slavery. So yeah, that was a main issue that we wanted to deal with, and that's really complex, and it's a discussion that's gaining much depth and much complexity on the last years because of the Black community really working hard to change it, to show show the differences and the oppression that is still really present in our everyday life.
Well, it feels like the reality is way more complex to and it's in a way it's impossible to depict it only in very realistic tools. And my next question probably is about your choices to include some I don't know how you would like to call it. We often use this term as magic realism when it comes to a little bit changing reality and to make it work a little bit stronger, to emphasize some complex issues in the history or in the contemporary world. So I would like you to talk or to explain us a little bit more about your choices of including genre elements in the film, but also this creative and, for me, in a way, like really disturbing way of joining the elements of contemporary world with the period pieces.
It's very interesting because we, both me and Caetano, in our previous work, we dealt with different types of genre. So there was an expectation. For instance, Caetano made a film called The Moving Creatures, his first feature, which is a musical. Uses tools of the musical genre to tell the story of three mothers. And I have done with Juliana Rojas a movie called Good Manners, for instance, which is a werewolf fairy tale or werewolf story. So there was this expectation, even from our producers, like, is this a ghost story? Is this, like this character Anna, who is seeing people from her past, are we going to see those ghosts with her? And me and Caetano, when we were writing, we were not completely sure yet of how deep into this or that genre we would end up going. But there was this point in which we decided that Anna was not necessarily the main character. She was one of the characters of a broad gallery of characters, and all of them were very important to us. So there was no reason for us to, assume the point of view of Anna or any specific point of view. We would have to make a multiple, more fragmented point of view in the storytelling. So that pulled us away from, let's say, the genre, the horror genre or the suspense, thriller, I don't know, elements, even though they exist. Anna mentioned seeing ghosts and seeing things. This is in the film, but the film doesn't actually enter or embrace any particular genre. But this idea of mixing the times, like making this time mix, is this idea that Caetano brought very early on to the project. When we discussed, he said, like, what if we used, even though the film is set in the 1899 and 1900, if we use some elements of the city today. And it was a hard concept to develop, as you can imagine, because you have to think of what type of location do you choose, when do you use, what type of image do you bring from a different time in order to not break the storytelling, to disrupt the film, but to complete the film, to really mean something. For us, this idea of digging was very important, because in a city that grew up as fast as São Paulo, every corner that you look, you can see the layers of history. It's like when you have a wall and you remove one layer of painting, and then there's another behind and another behind and another behind, and you can always see these layers coming one on top of the other. And that became like our concept to pursue and to try to slowly integrate in the film. We start slowly. We take a while to begin bringing in these elements. First, we try to create the conventions of the the period, and then we start allowing these elements to appear. And especially with one of the characters, Ina, she's the one who actually starts allowing some modern elements to appear in the film. This was done in the visual aspect, in the choosing of locations, in the choosing of backgrounds, and of what elements it would be interesting to include. But also it was very important during the sound design period that was done by Ruben Valdez. We encouraged him to think of sound elements that didn't necessarily need to be in the image, you know, like we could think of ways of designing the sound of a scene with modern elements, even if they're not present visually. And it's very interesting because we have been listening to the audience. People realize the presence of these elements at different moments. Some people even only realize it at the very end of the film, in one of the final scenes, even though it actually starts, I don't know, like 30, even less than 30 minutes into the film. We have the sound of a skate, little wheels of a skate rolling in a square. I mean, it's already there. Some people notice, some people take less time, some people take more time, but it's something that we developed in the film as a whole, you know, like looking at the 2 hour, little less than 2 hours, 1 hour and 50 minutes final edit of the film, trying to see how it develops in the timeline.
I don't know if it was your intention, but for me it feels like it's in a way it's some kind of a statement that the problems that existed 1 century ago, they are still present in contemporary world. But this connection between then and now, it's unbelievably powerful, at least for me. It was really interesting. But you've mentioned
there's something. Can I make one comment that it also relates for us to the idea of this ghost, the idea of a ghost story that Anna is seeing ghosts from the past, and it also became clear to us as we wrote and shot and discussed with the actors that these characters in a way were revealing themselves to be sometimes the actual ghosts. You know, this is more clear by the end of the film, but it relates to the title of the film, you know, this layer of all the dead ones, you know, all of these layers of life as well, of people who walked the streets and lived in these houses and slept in these rooms and made the coffee in the morning, you know, like these layers of lives as well that accumulate in the whole world, of course, but immensely in a city this size.
You started to mention the crew members that you worked with on this film, and I read in one of the interviews with you that actually a huge part of your crew was consistent of female professionals, including Helena Louvard, which is probably one of my most admirable cinematographers of contemporary cinema. Can you speak about this decision, whether it was intentional or based only on your collaborations with the artists before?
It's a mix of things. Since the beginning, of course, we are 2 white male directors. White in Brazil, of course, me and Marco are outside of Brazil. We are not necessarily seen as white, I think, because we are a mix. So it depends where we are to be considered white. But in Brazil, we are totally considered white, and socially we are. And we are two men, and we really wanted to have a very collaborative process with different people in the process of creating this film. This was a very, very collaborative work. The result of the film is really the result of these many voices that came together to construct the film. So we constantly work with many women in our crews, but in this film we really wanted to accentuate that, because we really wanted to have these different perspectives, different from our perspective, to construct the film together. So we deliberately wanted to have most of the crew composed of women, and it was the case. Most of the crew in the set was a female crew, so it was really good. We had a really wonderful exchange and collaboration with all of them. Most of them we already knew and worked with in other films, and so again, it was a natural, in a way, it was a natural process, but with the idea of composing a mostly female crew. And with Hélène, it was really special, because Hélène is one of the few people that we didn't know before the film. We have a co-production with France, so it was important for the film to have some important member of the crew coming from France. And we started discussing the possibilities, and when our French co-producer Clément Dubois suggested Hélène, we were really amazed by the idea. We really loved her work. And coincidentally, she was shooting Karim's film in Brazil at that moment. We didn't know that. When we decided to talk to her to see if she was interested, we discovered she was in Brazil. So we had she read the script, and we had a first Skype meeting, and it was really amazing. The talk went really well. She had some wonderful views about what she read, and since that moment it became I can't even find the adjective to say how wonderful it was, because she's an amazing artist, and it worked really well between us and her and the whole crew. And she respects so much everybody's work, and she has such a rich view of things, and she gives so wonderful suggestions, and she's so dedicated to work. We would shoot the whole day, and then we would stay, me, Marco, and her would stay in the set discussing the next days and making choices and preparing everything, because we had a very limited budget and limited time. So she really was eager to do the best she could, and to work with us to find the choices that we all wanted to find. So she's an amazing artist.
The result is indeed really, really rich and fascinating, and it really emphasizes the rich and complicated maybe themes covered by the film. But we're actually running out of time, and I would like to maybe, as the last question, to ask you about whether future collaboration between you two and this sharing directorial role is possible, and in general, what are you up to now when, as you mentioned before, the film production is kind of paused at the moment in Brazil?
Yeah, like Caetano said before, after we shot the film in late 2018, we were approached to do a TV series, and it was supposed to be a quick process. They already had the money. They needed us to sort of show run and do the series in a short time. And it actually became a very personal project as well. Once we got involved, we rewrote some ideas and we really put ourselves into that series. And it was a big pleasure to do that as we were editing and post-producing the film. Sometimes it was hard. It was a lot of stuff to do, but it also meant for us that last year, 2020, we were also lucky because we had work post-producing this TV series, that opened in last October. So we were fortunate to have something to do that was possible to do online, to do with a distance, editing and color grading and sound design in the series. We did it all with some distancing, and it made the year more bearable for us. I think all of these collaborations were very good, and we're excited to do more. So we have some ideas that we are discussing now, but they're all in early writing stage. So it's not likely that we will shoot anything together very soon, but we have 2 or 3 ideas that we are working on. Do you want to say something, Caetano?
I made a film. I had been shooting with my cell phone for over a year when the pandemic started. I was making this film that I didn't really know what it would be, but I was really working on it for a long time in this really new process for me of shooting things with my cell phone. And so I had a lot of material, and when the pandemic started, I used the time of the beginning of the pandemic when everything was really suspended, and to go back to this material, to organize it and to watch it again and to start editing. So now I've been editing for a long time, and now I think I have the final cut, and I'm about to, I don't know, maybe later this year, the film will start existing. It's called You Burn Us, and it's a very small personal film. But it helped me a lot as well to deal with this whole situation, having something to work on and to deal with apart from the series that was really good as well. So I have this really personal, small experimental film to finish now.
But it's probably also a way probably to deal with the situation, which we've heard that in Brazil the financing of cinema has been cut drastically, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
We
So
are not
turning your
facing
own
just
cell
the
phone-
pandemic. Yeah, exactly. We are facing the pandemics, but also culture in Brazil is really being destroyed, we may say. At least the public funding is being really suspended, and it's difficult to find a new way to get back to production as it was. We were in a very good moment, constructed over many years, of finding the right way to keep the cultural industry going, and now it's being destroyed. Clearly, it's a project from this government to avoid science, to avoid future, and they are really against free thinking. So we are dealing with that as well, and we are all in Brazil trying to find ways to keep doing our things and to survive at the same time. So it's a crazy period in our lives.
I really hope that the situation is somehow temporal, and the good changes are very near, not only in Brazil but in the whole world. And I hope that we will be able to, I don't know, to have a physical premieres of your future films, directed together or not, or separately. And I hope that we will one day welcome you physically here in Vilnius. So thank you very much for joining us, and enjoy the rest of the day, which is it's still the day and autumn in Brazil, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, end of
1
summer.
Great. Thank you, guys. And take care.
Thank you so much.
you.
Thank you.
Onde está o preto Alcebiades?
Ele morreu faz muitos anos.
Ouça o que eu te digo. Nós não podemos ficar aqui. Você tem escravos? Ai! Você nasceu livre.
São Paulo de Luanda, me trouxeram para cá. De São Paulo de Luanda.
Há mesmo perguntas que não precisam ser feitas. Aceitamos o mistério e aceitá-lo é a única forma de manter-se são.